Yo, what's up? Welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching a classic horror story. A classic horror story is a new Italian horror film on Netflix about 5 strangers who carpool across southern Italy. Their ride breaks down and they are forced to fight for their lives against a cult of violent outdoorsy folks. That sounds familiar. I was curious about this film for several reasons. For starters, it looked like an above average horror film. That alone, give it to me. Even more interestingly, it was marketed as a combination of Midsummer and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and after watching the movie, that checks out, along with 1,000 other films. But it's also an Italian horror film, and I always have a curiosity toward foreign horror films. Because like with all things, when you deal with and work with someone from a different culture, you're gonna get a new perspective, one different from yourself. So when you push play on a horror film that's not American, you're gonna get a new experience that doesn't feel American. And in the horror genre in particular, that's awesome because the genre gets a little saturated. Now, I don't think I've ever seen an Italian horror film, at least none come to mind off the top of my head, but after watching the movie in retrospect, that's kind of a noteworthy thing. But I was excited to push play on this one, so much so that when I saw the trailer for the first time a couple of weeks ago, I circled the date on my calendar. I was excited to watch it that night, and it just so happened to be a night that a massive storm was rolling over town.
Classic.
Let's start the pros with the entertainment value. From start to finish, this movie had me engaged. It's a 90-minute runtime that had me zeroed in through every one of those minutes. It's a nice bite-sized horror film. Did I agree with everything they did story-wise? Absolutely not. And we'll get to that at least in some capacity, but I can't deny that I was fully hooked from start to finish. How it fills those 90 minutes are some pretty cool pieces. Let's start with the location. Beautiful forest landscapes, from the high above aerial drone shots to when you're down on the ground running through the woods with our characters. I don't know if Italy is a European country that most people think of when they think of nature. Most people go New Zealand, Ireland, Iceland, but for me, after watching this movie, it made me think like the world's kind of sleeping on Italy. And when we exit the beautiful woods outside and enter really the one building in the film, this cabin, you're greeted with some intricate set design. It is eerie and magnificent. Every square inch that I could see on film was just designed to make you walk through the door and say, nope. That definitely gave me some Gretel and Hansel vibes, which I stand by to this day enjoying that film. Why? Because some great cinematography, color, and use of light goes a long way with me, and I stand by those elements with this film too. This is a beautiful looking film, from the way that it is shot, the way it is lit, the way that it is color graded. It is quite the spectacle to behold. Obviously, some people's definition of a spectacle is going to be different from mine. Most people expect like car crashes, explosions, stunts, larger than life. And while yes, I do enjoy films like that, I think I enjoy films like this a little bit more personally because it kind of shows the art of filmmaking, the love, the passion behind it, instead of just throwing millions and millions of dollars on there to make something bigger than the last film you watched. It is absolutely impressive, but I've heard stories about people that have worked for Marvel in like the special effects department and just does not sound like a very fun, collaborative, and creative environment. I imagine a lab filled with people all rendering different aspects of special effects, no one talking to each other like a flippin' sweatshop. Is the final product usually cool? Absolutely, but that doesn't mean it was made with any sort of passion. Obviously, I am hypothesizing. I was not on set for any Marvel film or this film, nor did I help with either film's post-production. But I'm pretty damn confident if you put this film right next to, okay, let's stop picking on Marvel and pick on someone its own size. The Conjuring universe, another horror film. If you put this film up next to any Conjuring universe film outside of maybe the James Wan helmed films, you'll be able to sniff out pretty easily which one was made for the love, the craft, the passion, and which one was just made for money. Don't get me wrong, I love the MCU. I love the Conjuring universe sometimes. I'm just saying that a film like this just holds a special place in my heart. This movie just looks and feels like it was made with hands that genuinely cared about the result outside of the financial implications, and it was beautiful to watch. What was less beautiful to watch was the gore and brutality of the film, but we are not in the cons yet, so that means I dug it. I think this film achieved a nice balance of the amount of gore that it showed. I mean, it shows you quite a bit, enough to make your stomach sick. But it also implies a lot of violence, like it would set up a very sickly scenario, cut away and then cut back. And at first I felt gypped. I was like, ah, come on. But then I kind of took a breath, pondered for a minute, imagine what the sequence would have looked like if we had actually seen the brutality and decided, it was okay. Sometimes our imagination will conjure up something a lot more disturbing than what they can create with makeup and prosthetics. And plus, I just didn't get the vibe that this film wanted to hang its hat on brutality and gore. This isn't Saw, Hostel, or any other Eli Roth film, despite the fact that it has its moments where it kinda feels like one. I thought that they just pushed the envelope just the right amount. The basket that they were putting all of their eggs in was the twist, the grand reveal, and unfortunately, that is where we'll start the cons. The marketing materials for this film were like, you feel like you've seen this movie before, but look closer because things aren't as they seem. And as you're watching, yes, that's exactly how you'll feel because this movie is insanely derivative for the first couple acts. Just cherry picking every horror film cliche, trope, plot, and just hucking it into a blender. It was a little frustrating at first. I'm like, yes, I'm enjoying the craftsmanship on display here, but seriously, what are we getting at? Obviously, I'm not going to spoil anything as to what they get at, but I will say that it was a little underwhelming. There's sort of two aspects to this grand reveal. One aspect is really predictable, the other one's a little silly and unrealistic. I'll admit that it did ease my frustrations of watching a film that is so derivative. It did tie that up nicely, but it didn't really do it in a logical or sensible way. It also rendered several subplots completely useless and wasted. It all just kind of felt like padding to get us to care more and more about the characters, but really at the end of the day, it just kind of felt like they were trying to fill lines on a script. Most of it just felt really inconsequential at the end of the runtime. Made you just ask, what was the point of this? We lingered on this plot point for so long and it did nothing. If you have a 90-minute film and still have that amount of BS script padding, then you must have a concerning insufficiency of content, and that, well, kind of checks out. Finally, I also wasn't the biggest fan of the film's soundtrack. The entire soundtrack just kind of felt like music that you'd hear in the trailer for a horror film, but not necessarily the horror film itself. Which is an interesting decision, perhaps a calculated one at the end of the day, but I just did not think that it fit most of the vibe situationally. All in all, though, this movie was alright. It was made beautifully, but the content was a little questionable. I wouldn't put it up next to other classic horror stories, but for a new 90-minute horror film just sitting on Netflix right now, sure, why not? I'm going to give a classic horror story a B-. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe to this channel to stay up to date with new videos coming real soon. Stay safe. Thanks for checking in.